Whoa, what's going on, everybody? My soldiers of shred, thanks for coming back. We, you and I, us, we're a family here. We all learn to play guitar well from the same source. That's why we're a family. I appreciate you coming back. I consider all you guys to be part of my shredding family. You're all soldiers of shred in my eye. We all learn the same way quality, the right way, and the first time. I would love for you guys to be able to do little things like. And you will. If you can't, you will. If you can, congratulations. You're SBA. Super badass. Today I have a very fun lesson for all you guys who are trying to put it all together. I'm going to explain some basic ways because there's way more than one way, which I'll show you some things today on how to do what I'm going to explain, but there are so many ways to do it. I couldn't possibly cover it all in even just a few videos. But I will do my best to cover it in a few videos. And the thing I'm talking about is how to cut a solo. That's right. Today I'm going to give you some tips and tricks and ideas and things to do to get yourself going, to get yourself writing an SBA solo. We want you to write something that sounds like something your heroes would write, the famous people you love, something that would make you famous. All right? That's what we want to do. We want to make you a badass guitar player. We want you to write wicked stuff. So I want to show you some things you can do to help to make your solos sound better to you so that you will like them more and hopefully everyone else will like them more. So as well as showing you some things that professional players do and things they use in their technique and whatnot. But there is a little bit of a method to the madness of writing a good solo. It's kind of like writing a book. You have to have an idea how the language works and a little more than the average person, let's say. So, if you're going to write a solo, you need to know a little more than the guy that's just going to play a cover song. Let me see if I can get myself in this here for you a little bit better. I will show you exactly what I'm talking about. So, guys, it's not going to be that hard to do this. I'm going to assume, if you're watching, you know the key of G major, E minor, because I'm going to be working out of the most popular key, E minor. More songs are written in E minor than any other key. You might as well use that key. If you can play in that key, then you can play in any key because that's the most common key. It's also the key that people like the most, I guess, because there's an E string here. Makes it better for the key of E minor, right? To end on that. Because the Aeolian sound, or the minor sound of the key you're in, is the most common, popular minor sound of all three. So let's get right into how we might write a solo. I will give you different examples. I will show you some things, and I will lead you off with a few things. And by the time you're done watching this entire video, you will have a lot of ideas and clues, and hopefully filled in some questions you may have had or things you were wondering about how things get done. So let's get right to it. The first thing we need to do when we're going to cut a solo is decide. Even before we decide, the first thing I was going to say is we're going to decide what note to revolve around. But before we even do that, you must know the notes in the chords being played in the progression that you're going to cut the solo over. So if you're going to play over some chords, you need to know what those chords are and what notes are in those chords. And the way I do it is I would, when I was learning anyway, I should say, I don't do this anymore, I don't have to, and you won't either. But in the beginning, what I would suggest you do is write down the names of the chords you're going to be soloing over and write down every note under that chord so you can see the notes of the chords, and here's why. When you write down all the notes of the chords and you can see every note you're going to play over, you will be able to see the main note in all of those notes and chords. So of all the chords you're playing over, one of those chords will be the main chord you're going to cut the solo over. So remember this, you can only solo over one chord or note at a time. You really can't solo over any other notes, and it's never been done that way. So you have to solo over one note at a time or one chord. So you're going to pick and figure out what is the main chord of this progression, because that's the chord you're going to cut over. And then the root note of that chord is the note you're actually going to pick to be the main note you build this solo around, and that's what I will explain to you. So every solo is built around a main note, one note. If it's the E minor key, many times it will be the E minor chord. Then it would be the E note in that E minor chord. You wouldn't solo to all the other notes in the chord. You're going to pull the solo to that one note. What that means is you're going to use that one note either more often than any other note to establish that note's sound, or you're going to resolve on that note to establish that note's sound. So let's demonstrate a few of these things. I will start with some simple exercises or examples and then show you some things that are a little more involved. That's what I like to do. I like to get into the good stuff. Now, all your techniques, all these little things you can do if you're doing pinches, right? And you can do whatever. All these little things, right? That's all filler stuff. We're going to use that stuff in our solos to add some flash and dash and some color and coolness. But a lot of times, those are bridges. They connect parts. Just like this might connect a part. I connect parts with the bombs all the time, and I'll show you how I do it in a lot of different songs. If you go to my my SoundCloud page, which I believe we are now linking to my videos, you will hear a couple of crazy solos I've pulled off using my whammy bar. And sometimes the bar is a connector to other pieces where the music just stops and kicks back in. And sometimes it's just part of it as it's moving. There's just a lot of different things you can do to connect all your parts. And that's what I'm going to show you today, is give you a few pieces to do. This is a nice lesson for you guys who don't have ADHD and can actually sit through a lesson. Or if you actually took lessons and sat through them, well, you're going to sit through a nice lesson today, because I got something real nice for you. I'm going to show you a lot of ways to write a great solo. Now, we're talking about a shorter solo at first because there's more involved in writing a longer one, just like a bigger book. There's more involved in writing a longer book than a shorter book. If the book's 100 pages, it's not the same as writing a book with 1,000 pages or 1,200, 1,500. It's a lot easier to write a small book like this than it is to write the Bible. So my English book was like this big, and my math book should have been like this. But the point is, the bigger the book, the more time it takes to write it, right? And the bigger the solo, the more time it takes to write it, which means there's more involved. And I want to show you some great ways to do that, but all in time. I want you to write a great solo. So let's get you writing something that's the average solo, an average 3 minutes long. The solo is 15 to 25 seconds. Let's see if you can let's help you understand how to do that. Put a wicked guitar solo together that's half a minute long. So this way, if you're writing your own material, you can pop a solo in there anytime you want. Let's understand right now what's going on. So we are picking the key of E minor, and we're going to use the E minor chord as our main chord. We'll just assume this progression is the 6-5-4 because we love that, right? I guess we'll go to this E first, and then maybe we'll go to the C. We'll just assume that this solo is just... Let's just say you're soloing or something like that. It revolves around E. We look at all the other notes. It's E, G, B, G, B, D, D, F sharp A, C, E, G. We see a lot of E and G in a lot of these chords, if you get what I'm saying. E and G are here in this chord. E and G are in this chord. This chord has a G and a B in it, which is two of the notes of E minor, G and B, right? If you have the G, B, D, really G major is just part of an E minor 7 chord. You're just missing the E. So you have 4 chords that end on the E. So we're going to use the key of E minor, and we could use all of its boxes. It depends. And, for today, we'll use a box or 2 maybe. And we're going to dive into some other things, like using a pentatonic sound. So we're going to get a lot out of this solo today. This solo we're going to do is going to take on a pentatonic vibe and the diatonic vibe. I'm going to show you how to do all that. It's very, very simple. If you just understand your notes on the guitar, like where they all are, or the key you're playing in, at least, if you know this key of E minor, will make things a lot easier for you. So I suggest you learn your boxes in the key of G, and you learn all your notes in the key of G. Now here we go. So the first thing I want to decide is where I'm going to end this solo. Now that I know I'm going to play in the key of E minor, I know I'm ending on an E. Now remember, these are lessons. These are beginner lessons. This isn't what you're going to do when you're a master at this. This is to get you started and get you learning. And once you know it, you can break every single rule, and you can ignore everything I'm telling you, because you'll be able to make your own decisions by then. Right now, I'm making the decisions for you because you can't make them on your own. So I'm telling you what you're going to do. And then once you do it, you'll be able to go, you know what, I can do that. Plus, I'll just do it my own way next time, which is great. But for now, just follow along and appease me so we can get you going here. So the first thing you're going to want to do is pick which note you're going to end on. The real beginners, like when we really start out writing our solos for the very first time or two, you should decide where you're going to end this solo so you already know where you're going. If you don't pick the ending note, you're going to run around and not know where to go. At least if you tell yourself you're picking your ending note now, you now have direction as to where you're going to go with this solo. So let's just, for our sake, I'm going to pick the high E here. I got 22 frets. This is my D, so I'm going to have to end this solo up here on the high E, which means I have to get to that E. Now you may or may not. If you can bend, then I assume you can bend to pitch, which means a whole step up. So I assume then if you know how to bend, and you've seen my videos or wherever you learn to bend, that you know how to bend, then you know this D needs to go to the E. Because we're ending the song in E, and this would be my E. Now the reason I'm going to use this E, just so you know, I'm choosing it because it has a vibrato. I have to vibrato the note. I got to bend it to get to the E. So I will do that in some crazy fashion when I'm done, and it's more exciting for me. Instead of just landing on some sort of E there, or maybe this. I want the highest E I can get. That guy. So I already know that's where I'm going. You want to know where you're going to end your solo so you can work towards getting there with the pieces you're going to put together in your solo. Your solo is going to be made up of the different techniques you're capable of playing while getting to the root note. It really doesn't matter where you start. You can start anywhere you want. You don't even have to start in the key. You want to start on a note that's not in the key, you might slide into a note in your key. I might start on G sharp. It's not in my key at all, but brings me to my E, right? No one's going to question where I start the note. No one's going to say, hey, you start on G sharp. So you can start wherever you want. But let me say, where you rest, and where you place your fingers when you either resolve or just temporarily rest, that's going to create sound for you. So you want to be careful where you rest. If you rest on notes that represent major notes in your key, you will have a sound you may or may not like because you're writing a darker metal solo. So a lot of times the note you might rest on would be the 5 is common. The 5 in E minor is B. That is a common note to rest on before you get to the resolution of resting on E and finishing on E. So 5 is it's a temporary spot you could rest, but the solo will not sound finished until you get to the root of E. B sounds temporarily finished. It's like a comma in a sentence. It's a pausing spot, but not a permanent pausing spot. You still have to get to the end of the sentence. You're not going to stop on that pause. It's only halfway there. The B is about halfway through your solo. You'll stop on the B to rest on it because it's a 5, but you can't finish there. It will not sound finished. It'll sound like you stopped in the middle of your sentence. So let's demonstrate what happens when we do that. So let's begin some things. We'll start a little quick solo. We know we're in a key of E minor. The very first thing we want to do is find a way to end on an E. So I'm going to, for now, this will be the ending note I'll end on later. I'm going to end on this E. And just for practice sake, I'm going to put together a simple pentatonic lick that ends on E. There it is. Simple thing that ends on an E, that's all you really need. Ends on E. You notice how it sounds finished. If I don't end on E, and I end on the G, it doesn't sound finished. It just sounds like I started and stopped. But if I finish this G back to the E, it sounds like I finished it. Sounds done. There's the other E. If you land on an E when you're done, it sounds finished. Right? If I end on a D, it doesn't sound finished until I go, right? So you're starting to understand now the resolution sound, the sound of resolving to the right note. You pick the note you want to resolve to based on what scale you're using. I'm using the E minor scale, the pentatonic scale, so the only note I can resolve to is either E or G. And since I'm not using the major key of G, the only choice I have is E minor, is the E note to land on. I cannot land on any other note in the E minor scale, the pentatonic scale rather, and expect it to sound good. And here's why. You can only land on the E note, and you can only land on the root note of a pentatonic scale when you're in that scale. You cannot land on any other note for resolution. If you're in a minor pentatonic scale, such as E minor, I'll use E as the example. If you're in an E minor pentatonic scale, the only note you can resolve to is E. You could resolve to the G, but we're not in the key of G major. We're not making a major happy sound. We're making a darker sound. So then G is not an option. It is a possible option if you were in the key of G major, then yes, you could land on the G. The two possible notes you could always land on are E or G, depending on which key you're in. Whichever one of those keys you're in, you can only land on that one note. So when we're in E minor, we don't have a choice of the other four notes. It must be the E. And here's why. Someone could say, Mezzy, is that your opinion? You're just telling me not to land anywhere else but the E? No, it's not my opinion, folks. This is a fact. And here's why it's a fact. This is why you're coming here. Because in order for you to have a successful sound out of a solo where you're resolving to a note, the scale you're using, now pay attention, the scale you're using must, by law, have the notes of that chord in that scale so that you can establish the sound of that chord in that solo. So if you're going to use the E note as your resolve note and you're in the key of E minor, you must be able to build the E minor chord of EGB. It'd be nice if you could build EGBD and complete the seventh chord for the full E minor sound. But you can still get away with just regular EGB. So if your scale does not contain those notes, then you cannot build an E minor sound, which is the key you are in and is the sound you are going for. So if the scale does not contain the notes of the chord you're going for the sound of, you can't make that sound, which means you can't write the solo. And you will find the truth in that is, if you try to write a solo using the E minor pentatonic scale, and you try to resolve to any other note besides E, it will sound like a gym locker of smelly guys. It will sound ugly. It will look like somebody who just woke up and has not got their best face on. Your solo is going to put me and everyone else to a place where we'd probably want to just cover our ears. Let's say it like that. No one's going to like anything being written if it does not resolve to the proper note. And when you're using a pentatonic scale, because you're removing two notes, you are limited on how many chords that scale will build. It is purposely meant to only build the root notes that it is building off of, the root chords. So the pentatonic scale only builds the notes of the chords that name that key. You either have the G major key or the E minor key. And so that scale, whether it's the G major pentatonic or the E minor, they're the same notes. They both build GBD and EGB. However, because it is called a minor pentatonic scale, because that's originally where it comes from, yes, it's a major pentatonic scale too, but hardly ever used that way, because that is not the original way the scale was formed. The scale was formed basically really built around the minor chord, and the proof in that is this. You can build an E minor 7 chord in that E minor pentatonic scale, but you cannot build the G major 7 chord. When you have 4 of the 5 notes of a scale built around the one chord that it's made from, you can't go wrong on Right Street. What I mean is, 4 of the notes in the pentatonic scale, 4 of them, are in the E minor 7 chord. You can't write a bad solo if you land on the E note using these 5 letters and you're using chords from this key. That's the simplicity of the pentatonic scale. It's basically foolproof if you land on the root note. So you can just practice all day. You can go to YouTube and type in E minor backing tracks and just play over them all day. And whatever tuning you're in, just compensate. If you're a half step below, then type in backing tracks for the key of E flat minor, because no one's going to tune you down on the internet and say it's, a half step down. They're just going to tune it in standard and record. If you're tuned a whole step down, then type in backing tracks tuned to D minor and play in E minor, because they'll be in standard tuning, which is D minor for them. And if you're a whole step down, well, that would be E minor for you. So you can do it like that if you're not in standard tuning. And what that does is allows you to figure out where to put that resolving note, because where you landed in your solo against those chords will make that solo sound better or worse. How you pair up your notes against those rhythm chords is what's going to make your solo give it a little extra flair. Now that you can't do until you're actually playing over the tracks. And I wouldn't, by the time you get to there, you want to understand how to put these notes together. So what you have to practice is getting to the root notes in the keys you're supposed to be, in your key you're in, without hitting the wrong notes and doing it creatively. And that's where the patterns come in. The more box patterns you know, the more patterns you can use to stay on the correct notes, because all the pattern is for is to teach you where all the right notes are, so you know where all the wrong notes are. And then if you want to use some of the other notes that are not in the pattern, that's up to you, because you would now know you're going outside the pattern of correct notes. So when we put a little solo together, let's just say we're doing something a little more, let's do another pentatonic vibe, but leave this box to another E. Now look at this thing. The first thing I like to do sometimes is establish the E sound first. So here we have an E, and we have a D that I'm bending to E. Now I like to, you can either softly hit it, I like to whack them. I'm extreme on the bending and things like that, so that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna whack it first. I'm gonna go to, I'll end up on this E here. And how creatively I get to this E is gonna put this little solo fill thing. It's gonna make it, that's what's gonna make it, it is how I get there and what type of route I make to get to that other E. There it is, just a little something like that. I could even, something else you might do is just something, a little pull-off lick. You might start here and end all the way on this E here. And just do a little thing down your key of G, but you're starting with E, you're rolling down the key, and you've already determined that you're gonna get to this E. So you might just do a bunch of pull-offs and see how they sound. There you go, little solo, little fill thing. You might even start on a lower note here and build your solo to this higher E by walking up your scale. So in order to not make it sound like you're walking a scale, you might put together some sort of little thing, and that's what patterns are for. When I say in the other videos, hey, I'm going to use a pattern, it's just so that the scale doesn't sound like I'm walking a scale. If I want to use the whole Dorian box, I don't want to go. Because it just sounds like I'm walking the box. What's the fun in listening to somebody play a pattern on a record, right? You want to hear some action. So I would use the majority of this box, do different things to get to this high E. Maybe I do this. Already we're in, there's E and my A. So I got the E in there already, and just resting on it. Now I can decide where else I want to go to build to that. When you go from an A to an E, because A and E are in the same power chord, they sound nice together. Right? So start acknowledging the notes of your power chords, because those two notes together when you're soloing always sound good together when you pair them up. A B and an F sharp, A and E, E and B, right? They all sound good together. Look at that B to the E. So if you now understand that B and E sound good when you go from a B to an E, you might end your solo on an E coming off of a B. You know who does that a lot? Yngwie. He loves the 5 to the root. That's where I learned it from. One of the best. To me, he is the best, but one of the best. The guy's insane. So whatever he's doing, I was doing it. So I'm just going to share with you. That's one of the things. And by the way, Zach does that too. That he lands on a 5 and then goes to the root. So that's one thing you can do is land on your 5. There's your B. Hey, the root's right there. So look, some creative little thing you do right in here. Just little things that make sense musically. This E to this E. G to E now, because G and E are in the same chord. G, D, E, all in the same chord. It's all in E minor 7, so it's all building around that E minor 7 sound. Has a nice little vibe to it, folks. It's just building around the E sound, using the notes of the E key, but also being aware of the notes that make the E minor chord. And that is why you want to know all the notes in your chord, because I just picked a bunch of them to end this lick. The last 3 notes in this little lick I just did is G, D, and E. 3 notes in E minor 7, right? 3 out of the 4. So do you understand now? It's how you get to E and how creatively you do that that makes your solo yours. Now, patterns. Let's talk a little pattern. Here's an Yngwie pattern. This is something he does constantly. I'm going to slow it down for you to show you. It's not exactly the notes, but it's something you can do. He'll play the same first section and then end the last note differently. Now, he will not travel the same string. He'll do it like this. Something like this. Where he stays off that same B. When we get to the F sharp to the B, he will go to the next string for the E instead of reaching all the way down here for E. He'll now be here. Then a D. Then he hits the C. He'll reach for the octave. And then continue whatever else he's going to do. But the concept here is we're following the root note. We're following the same note. Now that was off the B, which is the 5 in E. So you can practice. Your solos can build around the B and then just get to the E like I was showing you earlier. Okay? Something else you can do is just walk to the root, E. If the solo's 10 seconds long, it's 4 bars you got to go. Maybe you just drag those 4 bars out. I'll go to my neck pickup. Maybe you drag those 4 bars like this. Simple solo. Perfect. It would sound great in your progression if you were in E minor. It's built around the E. Other things, open string pull-offs. This open string focuses around the 5 in E minor, so you'd be basing your solo, the sound for that moment, around a strong B. You see, we're just building around the E. Now you go to the open E string and do the same thing. But now you're building your sound around E, so you have this E, and you can build it to end on this E. It's how you get there. So what are you capable of? If you're not fast, if you're just still working on your speed, then you be clean and you be neat and you be proud of whatever you're playing. Because you don't feel bad when you can't play fast. You feel bad when you write crap. Then you should feel bad. You don't feel bad if you're eating a clean peanut butter and jelly sandwich, because that sandwich is clean. What do you want? I could give you peanut butter and jelly on a clean plate, or I can cook you a steak and put it on a plate that's been eaten off of somebody else and I didn't wash the plate. It's a $100 steak on a dirty plate somebody else ate off of, and you don't know them. But I'll give you a $100 steak on that plate if you want one. Or I can give you this $3 peanut butter and jelly that's wrapped up all nice and clean. So no one wants fast and sloppy or expensive and dirty. I'd rather have cheap and clean or slow and clean. So don't feel bad if you're not at that point yet where you're rifling down the strings. Put your time in like everybody else and earn the right to be able to do it like we all did, and you'll get there. But if you want something for free, I don't know how to do that. I don't know anything about that. You got to earn the skills. I'm trying to help you learn. Earn them is the least amount of time by things that work very effectively. So follow what I'm saying and try it. The worst happens is it doesn't work, and you go, well, it doesn't work. I'll do something else. Big deal. At least you know it doesn't work, and you don't have to wonder anymore if it's working or not. You know it does or doesn't. So how creatively you use your technique to get to the root notes is what you're looking for. Now, when we do this, there's things everywhere, so you have to try. I've shown you different things you can do. I'll give you a little something you want to do to build a box into the root. Let's say you want to get to this E, and you want to build some tension in this Dorian box. You might double some things because it sounds like it's taking longer to build, and it sounds like it's more intense, it's more dramatic. Instead of just going, it sounds a little bit more involved. So something like this, as long as you get to that E, doesn't matter how you do it. But if you're going to rest somewhere, make sure it's a note that sounds good to rest on. Some sound better than others depending on what you like and what you're going for. Now this little harmonic minor A thing, this G sharp A, we've gone over that a million times in some other videos. That just simply resolves to A. So now I'm in the key of A minor using the harmonic minor vibe. Don't forget you got a little trilling in there. You got hammer-ons. Everybody's concerned about the pull-offs, but sometimes they forget about the hammer-ons. You can build nice hammer-on moves. Here's a little Steve Vai move, if I can remember, something like that. He does things like this. He'll use the two strings. But G and D are in the same chord. E and B, same chord. So he did this little thing like that. And it makes total sense because the notes are in the same key. So when you're establishing your solo, you're picking the note of the key. You're establishing the key you're in. You're picking the note you're going to end on. In the beginning, we end on the minor note that names the key. So we're in E minor in the most popular key. This way you can do this, and if you want to make up your own solo in other songs, well, the E minor key has more songs than any other key. So if you can do this in E minor and you learn your notes in E minor, you have more choices to songs you can use this skill with before having to develop other keys. If you learn this in the key of, say, B minor, there are 1/10 as many songs in B minor as there are in E minor. So you're a lot more limited in what you can practice over if you're learning it in the key of B minor first. So that's why I say learn it in E minor, and then you can pretty much play every single radio rock song there is and cut your own solo in there. When the songs come up for the solos, what I used to do is I would turn them down a little bit so I can just hear what's going on, and then I would cut my own lick over it. You can do things like that as well. These are some basic, simple ideas on how to write a successful solo, a little lick, piece of music that's going to turn into your solo, and have it have a quality to it that maybe you didn't understand before. Things work around the root note, and I hope I've made that clear and at least made it so you can begin searching around for this key of E minor while ending on E. And the creative way you do it, and I didn't get to show you yet, hopefully you'll do it creatively. I like to use the whammy bar, so let's just give you an example of what might happen if I'm going to use the bar to bridge something. I might use the pentatonic lick first as one of thousands of examples. Now I want to get out of this sound, so I'm going to go to another sound. I'm going to do some of these streams, so I'll pop the thing. And just simply take off. Just use the bar to connect some sounds. So. And you're done. It's just the whammy bar and these little things they just get you in between pieces somewhere. So you might be it's a connector, it's a bridge. Same thing in your solos. You might be and then go and then continue. They're just little things that take your, take the ear off of something else till you get somewhere else. It's little fill like salt and pepper on your meal. So I hope I've explained some ways to get started in writing solos. There's a lot of different ways, but so many times I get questions on how to write a solo. How do I write a lick? How do I write? How do I write? And I'm just like, I'm telling, like, I don't know. Like, you just write. But there's a method to that madness. I hope I explained it to you guys. If you have any questions on what I was explaining here, ask them. This is like your lesson now. This is you and me sitting together. Ask me a question if you have it. I'll get right back to you, and I will explain things to you. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in another segment of how to write solos as we get more involved with more things going on in the solos. And all I want to do is explain some things so you can go off and do it yourself. Thanks for watching. I will see you in another video.